We're on every night, live, weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern. Of course, you may not be watching it then. You are certainly watching it now, but you might be watching the replay at 11 p.m. or 2 a.m. Eastern, or at 7 a.m. or noon, or on 3 p.m. Eastern. We run all those because we think you should memorize it. Upon his inauguration, President Obama declared that the time of torture in this country's name was over. He never really did say anything about all of torture's lesser but nonetheless unacceptable cousins. The Nation magazine reveals CIA activity in Somalia that mirrors, to some degree, some of the excesses of the Bush era. According to investigative reporter Jeremy Scahill, Mr. Obama's national security policies are at odds with his 2008 campaign promises to reform all the harsh tactics of the Bush era of secret prisons and the seemingly benign word rendition, which is really simply a euphemism for kidnapping. Scahill reports the Central Intelligence Agency is ramping up its activities in Somalia to counter Islamist militias allied with al-Qaeda, which control most of the country. These include overseeing a counterterrorism training center at International Airport at the capital of Mogadishu and supervising an underground prison staffed by Somalis on the CIA payroll, which, quote, consists of a long corridor lined with filthy small cells infested with bedbugs and mosquitoes. Former prisoners described the cells as windowless and the air thick, moist, and disgusting. Prisoners, they said, are not allowed outside. Many have developed rashes and scratched themselves incessantly. Some have been detained for a year or more. Inmates who had been there for long periods would pace around constantly, while others leaned against walls, rocking. Mr. Scahill also suggests that American-backed African Union forces fighting the Somali Islamists, the Shabaab, are indiscriminately shelling villages and killing innocent civilians. Although only about 36 CIA employees are said to be working in Somalia now, American Special Operations units are also carrying out missions in that country. To the Obama administration, Somalia is a flashpoint for terrorism and a priority. But Jeremy Scahill suggests collateral damage, especially the killing, imprisonment, and abuse of innocent civilians, has already outraged and angered many Somalis. Here is the national security correspondent of The Nation and Countdown contributor Jeremy Scahill. Welcome. It's good to see you, sir.
Congrats on the show, Keith.
Thank you kindly. And congrats on this story, although I wish none of it were true.
Yeah.
You went to Somalia. What did you see?
Well, almost within minutes of arriving in Mogadishu, I saw a CIA facility that was freshly built. They finished construction on it 4 months ago. It looked very similar to forward operating bases that you see in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And then I met a man who, on my second day there, who described to me a basement prison that he had been held in for a number of days, where he met prisoners, including people from Western countries and from Kenya, that had been brought by aircraft into Mogadishu and held in this prison. And he described it was a hellhole, basically. And when I dug around and started to interview Somali officials, I found Somalis who were on the CIA payroll that described the program to me. And basically what they said is that the CIA is paying 100 or more Somali agents. They are trying to build a capacity for them to do targeted kill and capture operations, but they also are running this prison that's in the basement of the National Security Agency, right behind the U.S.-backed president's compound. And American and French intelligence agents are allowed to interrogate prisoners in that facility whenever they want. And so when I spoke to the U.S. government, I called the CIA for comment, and they provided an official to talk to me, but they said I couldn't identify where that official works or what his name was, but just said he was familiar with the program. Didn't deny any aspect of the story, but tried to spin it and say that, you know, this only happens a couple times, we're just helping the Somalis. That's not what I heard on the ground, and they know it's true. The U.S. is, for all practical purposes, running this program and this prison in Somalia.
And the defense is we're only a little bit pregnant.
Right. Well, I had a back and forth with this official I shall not name, where I was saying, so you're saying that 1 or 2 cases of interrogating someone in a dungeon prison infested with bed bugs, a person who was snatched based on U.S. intelligence from another country that they're a citizen of, brought to a country not of their citizenship and interrogated by you 1 or 2 times would be okay then? And he said, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. So, you know, they tried to spin, and unfortunately CNN, ABC News, and other big corporate media outlets just printed the CIA spin. They served as conveyor belts for the propaganda, right. Very similar to what happened, and you reported a lot on this, with the New York Times and Judy Miller in the run-up to the Iraq War, where, you know, Dick Cheney would make a phone call, Judith Miller would report it, and then Dick Cheney would say, well, see, the New York Times is reporting it.
Exactly.
Very similar to what's happening. And unfortunately, CNN really played ball with the CIA on this for spin.
Is torture the only thing, or perhaps torture and volume of prisoners, are they the only things that would be missing from a George W. Bush presidency blueprint for a place like this?
Yeah, I think that, you know, President Obama, being a very sharp constitutional lawyer himself, has probably tried to create a structure where they have plausible deniability, that this is legal, this is special circumstances. It's the Kenyans that are doing the rendition, not the Americans. Really, we're just playing with semantics here. I didn't hear any tales of waterboarding or torture happening in this prison, but the fact that you're holding people in this dungeon with no access to the outside world, no Red Cross access, no due process whatsoever, that should be really alarming to any American that believes in the Constitution and the rule of law. I informed the Red Cross of this prison. They said they had never been made aware of it. And remember, this prison, we discovered it right after we learned that the U.S. military forces had snatched a Somali in international waters, brought him to a Navy ship, and held him for 2 months incommunicado before bringing him to the United States to charge him with terror-related charges. This all sounds very similar to how the Bush administration operated its so-called war on terror.
Have they outsourced it the way the previous administration did? Do we have mercenaries in there too?
Of course, yeah. I mean, in fact, there are mercenaries in Mogadishu right now. They are largely British or Rhodesian mercenaries, you know, white African mercenaries that are patrolling around the airport. And Eric Prince, the guy who founded Blackwater, was recently in Mogadishu in the VIP lounge there, meeting with people, and one of his subsidiary companies is trying to get into the anti-piracy business. In fact, I think we talked about this once on your show.
You mentioned Western nations as the source of some of these rendition victims. Do we have either a measure of which ones, or how many, or what sort of volume of operation we're talking about?
Right. I think that most of the people that have been rendered to this secret prison, well, it's not secret anymore, to this underground prison in Somalia, were snatched by Kenyan anti-terrorism forces. The U.S. admitted to me that one man in particular was snatched based on U.S. intelligence that said that we want him, quote, taken off the streets. In 2007 alone, this was under Bush, 85 people were rendered to Somalia from Kenya at the urging of the U.S. and Ethiopian governments. Okay. What we're looking at now is an Obama administration continuation of that. What's needed is for an international organization like the Red Cross to have access to figure out who's in that prison and why. So
there was a Bush operation along these lines, and essentially what the Obama administration has done is, rather than close it, update the facilities?
That's what it seems like, Keith.
Jeremy Scahill of The Nation, and we're very proud to say the Countdown contributor as well. Great work.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
You too. Thank you, Keith.
All the best. Cenk Uygur's departure from MSNBC, the analysis of Cenk Uygur. Go ahead.